I'm Esther, 57 years old, and I'm about to tell you how my daughter Rachel kicked me out of her wedding. 5 years after my divorce, our relationship was rocky at best. I'd been invited to the wedding, but with strict conditions. When Rachel publicly humiliated me during her toast, I was devastated. But then her groom Tyler stood up, and what he did next changed everything between us. Before I tell you what happened next, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, what happened next might change how you think about family forever. My story begins with a 30-year marriage to Frank that ended 5 years ago. We had Rachel when I was 29, and she was 23 when our divorce happened. It wasn't my choice. I'd built my life around our family, even putting my career as a pediatric nurse on hold multiple times to support Frank's frequent relocations for his corporate job. I passed up a management position twice because Frank needed me to handle things at home while he travelled. I thought we were happy, or at least content in the way many long-term marriages settle into comfortable patterns. Frank worked long hours, but I believed it was for our family. I kept our home running smoothly, maintained relationships with friends and extended family, and tried to be the glue that held everything together. The discovery of Frank's affair with Amanda, a colleague 15 years his junior, wasn't dramatic. There was no lipstick on his collar or mysterious hotel receipts. Instead, it was a gradual realization that he was emotionally absent, followed by accidentally seeing texts on his phone when I borrowed it to make a call after mine died. The messages made it clear the affair had been going on for nearly a year. When confronted, Frank didn't deny it. Instead, he told me he deserved happiness and that our marriage had become stagnant. Within 3 months, he had moved out and filed for divorce. 6 months after that, he and Amanda were married at the courthouse. Rachel was initially supportive of me. She was angry at her father and refused to meet Amanda for nearly a year. She would come over to my new apartment, a significant downgrade from our family home that Frank kept in the settlement, and we would talk for hours. I tried not to speak negatively about Frank, believing it wasn't fair to put Rachel in the middle. But something shifted about 18 months after the divorce. Frank and Amanda had been working hard to win Rachel over. They took her on lavish vacations, bought her expensive gifts, and Frank even helped her with the down payment on a beautiful condo downtown. He also invested heavily in the boutique fitness studio she had dreamed of opening. Rachel had always been close to her father, and the financial support cemented their bond. Our relationship began to deteriorate. Rachel's calls became less frequent, and when we did speak, she seemed irritated by everything I said or did. She began to mention comments Frank had made, suggesting that I had been distant during the marriage, that I had neglected Frank's needs, that perhaps I hadn't tried hard enough. "Dad says you were always more interested in your patients than your family," she said during one particularly painful conversation. "He says you used to cancel date nights to cover shifts." It wasn't true. I had picked up extra shifts when we needed money, especially for Rachel's dance lessons, and later her college tuition. Frank had rewritten our history, and Rachel was believing his version. Despite this, I kept trying to maintain our relationship. I attended every event at her fitness studio. I sent thoughtful gifts for holidays and her birthday. I tried to arrange lunches and dinners, though she cancelled more often than not. Frank had painted me as difficult and unstable, and Rachel had accepted this narrative. When Rachel met Tyler at her fitness studio, where he had come in for personal training sessions, I was genuinely happy for her. Tyler seemed kind and level-headed. He came from a good family and had a successful career in architectural design. When they got engaged after 14 months of dating, I hoped it might be a chance for healing. That hope was short-lived. Rachel called to tell me about the engagement, but in the same conversation informed me that Frank would be walking her down the aisle, alone. "It's traditional, Mum," she said when I couldn't hide my disappointment, "and Dad is paying for the whole wedding." I tried to be understanding. "Of course, honey. Whatever makes your day special." But inside I felt like I was being erased from my own family. The wedding invitation arrived on heavy cream cardstock with gold foil lettering. It was beautiful, but came with a phone call from Rachel outlining my restrictions. "We're having a family meeting about the wedding," Rachel announced when I answered the phone. "That's wonderful, honey. When should I come over?" "Actually," Rachel hesitated, "it's just going to be you and me. I need to talk about some logistics." We met at a coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory. Rachel looked tense as she stirred her latte, not meeting my eyes. "So, about the wedding," she began, "I need to go over some details with you." The details were actually conditions for my attendance. I would be seated at table 20, far from the wedding party and Frank's table. I could not bring a +1, despite having been dating David, a kind widower I met through my hospital volunteer work for nearly 2 years. I was to avoid Amanda completely, which meant staying away from Frank as well, and there would be no family photos that included me. "The photographer has a limited time," Rachel explained, not looking at me. "We need to be efficient." I sat there stirring my untouched coffee, trying to hold back tears. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. "It's your day." "Thank you for understanding," Rachel said, visibly relieved that I wasn't causing a scene. "I just want everything to be perfect." When I told David about these conditions, he was furious on my behalf. "That's ridiculous, Esther. You're her mother. You have every right to be properly included in this wedding." "I know, but if I push back, she might not want me there at all," I explained. "I'd rather be there under these conditions than not be there at all." David disagreed but supported my decision. "Just know that you deserve better treatment," he said, holding my hand across the dinner table. I threw myself into wedding preparations anyway, buying an expensive dress in a soft blue that had always been Rachel's favorite color on me. I spent months creating a handmade quilt as a wedding gift, stitching in fabrics from significant moments in Rachel's life, a piece of her baby blanket, a scrap from her first dance recital costume, a fragment of the graduation gown she wore to collect her business degree. Each square represented a memory, a tangible piece of our shared history that I hoped might remind her of the bond we once had. As the wedding approached, I learned about events I hadn't been invited to: the bridal shower hosted by Amanda, the rehearsal dinner at an exclusive restaurant downtown. Each exclusion was a small wound, but I tried to focus on the wedding itself. At least I would be there for the most important day. My sister Janet and my best friend Maureen became my support system during this time. Janet had witnessed the deterioration of my relationship with Rachel and was outraged on my behalf. "You need to stand up for yourself more," Janet insisted during one of our weekly phone calls. "Rachel is being manipulated by Frank, but she's an adult now. She's responsible for her own behaviour." Maureen, who had gone through a similar experience with her ex-husband, turning their son against her, offered more gentle advice. "Just keep showing up with love," she said. "That's all you can do. Eventually the truth has a way of coming out." I clung to this hope as the wedding day approached. Maybe seeing me there supporting her despite everything would remind Rachel of the mother who had always been there for her. The morning of Rachel's wedding dawned clear and bright. I spent extra time getting ready, carefully applying makeup to cover the signs of sleepless nights. My blue dress fit perfectly, and I fastened the pearl necklace that had been my mother's around my neck. I wrapped the quilt in silver paper with a white bow and placed it carefully in the back seat of my car. The venue was a beautiful countryside estate, about an hour outside the city. Rolling hills surrounded a restored 19th century mansion with gardens in full summer bloom. Under different circumstances, it would have been a joy to arrive at such a picturesque setting. I was greeted at the entrance by a wedding planner with a clipboard and an earpiece. "Name?" she asked briskly. "Esther Wilson." "I'm the mother of the bride." Her expression shifted subtly. "Yes, Ms. Wilson, you're at table 20. That's in the far corner of the reception tent." She pointed toward a massive white tent set up on the lawn, then added, "The ceremony will be in the garden. Seating is open on the bride's side, but the first 3 rows are reserved for immediate family." The implication was clear. I was not considered immediate family. I found a seat in the 5th row and watched as guests arrived. Frank and Amanda made their entrance both immaculately dressed, Frank in a tailored tuxedo and Amanda in a designer dress that flattered her slim figure. They were seated in the front row, greeting guests with warm smiles and hugs. Several people who had been mutual friends during our marriage nodded politely to me but kept their distance. The ceremony was beautiful. Rachel looked radiant in her white gown, her dark hair swept up in an elegant style adorned with small white flowers. Frank proudly walked her down the aisle, his chest puffed out with pride. I cried as Rachel and Tyler exchanged vows, genuinely happy to see my daughter, committing to what appeared to be a loving relationship despite my own pain. After the ceremony, I made my way to my assigned table for the reception. I was seated with distant cousins of Tyler's and a couple of colleagues from Rachel's fitness studio. They were polite but clearly confused about why the mother of the bride was sitting with them rather than at the family table. I was introduced to Tyler's parents, Gregory and Helen Wright, during the cocktail hour. They were cordial but distant, and I suspected they had heard only Frank's version of our family history. Tyler's grandmother Martha, however, approached me separately. She was a small woman with bright eyes and a direct manner. "So you're Esther," she said, taking the seat next to me that had been temporarily vacated. "I've wanted to meet you." "It's nice to meet you too," I replied, surprised by her friendly approach. "Family is complicated," she said, patting my hand. "Don't worry, things have a way of working themselves out." Before I could ask what she meant, she was called away by Helen, leaving me puzzled by the encounter. The reception began with the first dance between Rachel and Tyler, followed by Rachel dancing with Frank. I watched from my distant table, trying to maintain a smile, despite feeling like an outsider at my own daughter's wedding. When it came time for toasts, Rachel stood up, champagne flute in hand. She thanked everyone for coming, then began to speak about family. "They say you can't choose your family," she said, smiling at the guests. "But I disagree. My chosen family are those who make me happy. Everyone here is family to me, except one person." The room went silent. I felt a cold dread spreading through me. Rachel's eyes found mine across the room. "Mum, you can leave now." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Guests turned to look at me, some with shock, others with uncomfortable pity. Frank had a small, satisfied smile on his face. Amanda looked down at her plate. Time seemed to stop as I sat frozen in my chair, the humiliation washing over me in waves. Then mechanically I stood up. My hands trembled as I reached for my purse. I couldn't look at anyone as I prepared to walk out of my daughter's wedding, publicly rejected and dismissed. As I turned to leave, I heard a chair scrape against the floor. Tyler had stood up. His face was flushed, but his voice was steady as he spoke. "I need to say something before anyone leaves." Rachel looked at him in confusion. This clearly wasn't part of the plan. "Family is complicated," Tyler began, echoing his grandmother's earlier words to me. "When my own parents divorced when I was 16, I was angry and hurt. I blamed my mum for a long time because that was the easier narrative to accept. It took years for me to understand the full truth." He looked directly at Rachel, who appeared stunned. "Love, I've been concerned about your relationship with your mother since we met. It didn't make sense to me that the warm, loving woman you are would be so cold toward the woman who raised you. So I did something I probably shouldn't have. I investigated." A murmur went through the crowd. Frank shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "What I found," Tyler continued, "was a devoted mother who put her family first at every turn. I found hospital records of part-time work so she could be home for her daughter's events. I found neighbours who talked about Esther driving Rachel to dance classes 3 times a week for 10 years. I found old colleagues who remembered Esther turning down promotions to accommodate her husband's career." He turned to look at me, still standing frozen by my table. What I didn't find was any evidence of the narrative that Rachel has been fed, the one where her mother was cold, neglectful, or difficult. Tyler then addressed the entire room. What I did find was evidence of manipulation, financial leverage used to control a daughter's perception, a deliberate campaign to rewrite history. Frank stood up abruptly. This is inappropriate. You have no right to bring this up at the wedding I paid for. That's exactly my point, Tyler responded calmly. You've used money to control the narrative and isolate Esther from her daughter. Martha Tyler's grandmother stood up next. I've seen this before, she said, her voice carrying despite her small stature. My own son-in-law did the same to my daughter during their divorce. Used money and gifts to turn my grandchildren against her. It took years to undo that damage. I recognized the pattern the moment I saw how Rachel treated her mother today. Tyler walked over to me and gently took my arm. Esther, please don't leave. I'm asking you to stay, not just as a guest, but because I want your blessing for this marriage. I love your daughter, and I want us to begin our life together with truth, not comfortable lies. Rachel was staring at Tyler, her expression a mixture of anger, confusion, and the first glimpses of shame. Frank tried to interject again, but Gregory, Tyler's father, raised his hand. Frank, I think you've said enough. This is Tyler and Rachel's day, and if Tyler wants his mother-in-law present, that should be respected. Other guests began to shift uncomfortably. Then slowly, several began to stand. First was an older woman I recognized as Rachel's former dance teacher. Then a couple who had been our neighbors when Rachel was growing up. Then Maureen, my best friend, who had come as a guest of Tyler's family through an arrangement I hadn't known about. One by one, people stood in silent support. Not everyone, but enough. Rachel looked around, her confident facade crumbling as she witnessed this quiet rebellion. Please stay, Esther, Tyler said again, for Rachel's sake as much as anything else. I nodded, unable to speak through the lump in my throat, and returned to my seat. The wedding reception continued, but nothing was the same. A truth had been spoken that couldn't be unheard. The reception proceeded in an atmosphere of awkward tension. The band played and some guests danced, but there was an undercurrent of discomfort that couldn't be ignored. Tyler had taken Rachel aside for a private conversation, and they had been gone for nearly 20 minutes. I remained at my table, uncertain of what to do or how to act after such a public scene. Martha Tyler's grandmother came and sat beside me. You did well, she said, patting my hand. Standing there with dignity despite everything, that took courage. I don't know if it was courage or shock, I admitted. I still can't believe any of this happened. Martha nodded knowingly. I've been watching the dynamic between you, Rachel, and her father for months now. Tyler confided in me about his concerns early on. That man, she gestured discreetly toward Frank, who was in deep conversation with Amanda across the room, has been poisoning the well for years. How did you know? I asked. I recognized the signs. The way Rachel would tense up whenever you were mentioned, the contradictions in her stories about her childhood, the excessive gratitude toward her father for basic parental support, classic signs of parental alienation. Gregory Tyler's father joined us, pulling up a chair. Esther, I owe you an apology. We should have seen what was happening and stepped in sooner. Tyler tried to tell us, but we thought he was overreacting. You couldn't have known, I said. Frank is very convincing. He's in sales after all. Gregory shook his head. Still, as parents ourselves, Helen and I should have recognized the situation. Tyler has been worried about Rachel's relationship with you for months. He said it was the one flaw in an otherwise wonderful woman, this blindness about her father's manipulation. As we spoke, I noticed movement across the reception area. Rachel was approaching, her eyes red-rimmed with Tyler by her side. My heart began to race. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her after such a public rejection. Rachel stopped in front of me, her hands twisting the small purse she carried. Mom, she began, her voice breaking. Can we talk privately? I nodded and followed her to a small sitting room inside the main house. Tyler squeezed her hand reassuringly before leaving us alone. Rachel stood by the window for a long moment, gathering herself. When she turned to face me, tears were streaming down her cheeks, ruining her careful makeup. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I've been horrible to you." "Rachel," I began, but she shook her head. "Please let me say this. Tyler showed me evidence. Text messages from Dad coaching me on what to say to you, emails where he suggested ways to exclude you from wedding events. He even showed me the original contract for my business. I never read the fine print. Dad owns 51%. He's been controlling everything, including me." Her words tumbled out between sobs. "All these years, he's been subtly rewriting our history, telling me stories about you that didn't match my memories, but he was so confident that I started to doubt myself. He told me you had been emotionally distant, that you had prioritized work over family, that you had made him unhappy for years before the divorce." I moved closer and tentatively touched her arm. "Why didn't you ever ask me about these things?" "I don't know," she admitted, looking ashamed. "At first, I was so angry about the divorce, about our family being torn apart. Then Dad was so supportive financially and emotionally while you seemed fragile. It was easier to believe his version where you were partly to blame, and once I started down that path, each step made it harder to turn back." "Frank was very strategic," I said quietly. "The condo, your business, those weren't gifts. They were ways to keep you dependent on him." Rachel nodded miserably. "Tyler helped me see that. He's been trying to show me for months, but I refused to listen. I was so awful to you, Mum. Especially today. I don't know if you can ever forgive me." "I already have," I said, and realized it was true. The pain was still there, but underneath it was the unconditional love I had always felt for my daughter. "Tyler said you brought a gift," Rachel said hesitantly. "He thought we should open it together." I had almost forgotten about the quilt. A staff member had placed it on the gift table when I arrived. Rachel retrieved it, and we sat together on a small sofa as she carefully unwrapped it. When she unfolded the quilt and saw the squares of fabric from her life, each memory stitched with care, she broke down completely. "You kept all these," she said, touching a square from her high school debate team uniform. "I remember this, and this." Her finger moved to a piece of the costume she wore as the Sugar Plum Fairy in her dance studio's production of The Nutcracker. "Of course I kept them," I said. "You're my daughter." "No matter what has happened between us, that has never changed." We heard a commotion outside the door. Raised voices, one of them Frank's, then silence. "Dad and Amanda left," Rachel explained. "Tyler confronted Dad about some of the things he found. Gregory backed him up. It got uncomfortable." She looked down at the quilt in her lap. "I don't know what happens now, with any of us." "Now," I said, taking her hand, "we go back to your wedding reception. We celebrate your marriage to a man who clearly loves you enough to risk everything to show you the truth. And tomorrow, we begin rebuilding what we've lost." Rachel nodded, wiping away tears. "I'd like that." The remainder of the wedding reception transformed into something I never could have anticipated. When Rachel and I emerged from our private conversation, the atmosphere had shifted. Frank and Amanda's departure had relieved some of the tension, and Tyler immediately came to embrace both of us. "Are we okay?" he asked, looking from Rachel to me. Rachel nodded, taking both our hands. "We will be." Martha approached, her eyes twinkling. "Now, I believe there's still a wedding to celebrate, and a mother-daughter dance that wasn't on the program, but absolutely should be." The band, taking their cue from Tyler, began to play "Wind Beneath My Wings," a song I used to sing to Rachel when she was small. As we moved onto the dance floor, I felt the weight of years of misunderstanding begin to lift. It wasn't gone completely, but a crack had appeared in the wall between us. "I'm sorry I hurt you," Rachel whispered as we danced. "I was so wrong." "We have time," I assured her. "That's what matters now." After our dance, I was surprised when my phone buzzed with a text from David. "Look outside," it read. I glanced toward the entrance of the tent and saw him standing there, handsome, in a blue suit. "I invited him," Tyler admitted when he saw my surprise. I thought you should have someone here for you too. David joined me for the rest of the evening, a solid presence at my side as I navigated this unexpected shift in my relationship with my daughter. Helen, Tyler's mother, made a point of inviting me to sit at the family table for cake cutting. We got off on the wrong foot, she said. I'd like to start over. By the time Rachel and Tyler left for their honeymoon, something fundamental had changed. Rachel hugged me tightly before getting into the decorated car. I'll call you from Hawaii, she promised. We have a lot to talk about. Back at home with David later that night, I finally allowed myself to process the emotional whirlwind of the day. Are you okay? David asked, as we sat on my small balcony looking at the city lights. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me is still in shock. Another part is hopeful. And there's still hurt that can't just disappear overnight. That's all normal, he assured me. What matters is that the truth came out. The rest will take time. 3 days later, Rachel called from Hawaii as promised. The conversation was awkward at first, both of us unsure how to navigate our new reality. I keep thinking about things Dad told me over the years, Rachel said. Trying to separate fact from manipulation, it's hard to know what was real. We can talk about anything you want, I offered. No question is off limits. That first call lasted over 2 hours. It was the beginning of a long, sometimes painful process of reconnection. Rachel had to confront not only her father's manipulation, but her own willingness to believe it. I had to work through the hurt of being rejected by my only child. When Rachel and Tyler returned from their honeymoon, we arranged a dinner at their apartment. David came with me for support. The evening was stilted at first, all of us hyper-aware of the elephant in the room. I found something while we were away, Rachel said as we finished dessert. She went to get her laptop and opened it to show us a series of emails between her and Frank from the previous year. Tyler suggested I look through old communications to help me see the pattern, she explained. Look at this one where Dad tells me not to invite you to my birthday dinner because your mother gets emotional at celebrations and might make it about herself. I remembered that birthday clearly. I had dropped off a gift at Rachel's condo that morning since I hadn't been invited to the celebration. Frank had seen me leaving as he arrived with an enormous flower arrangement. And here, Rachel continued, pointing to another email, he's telling me not to mention to you that he helped with the business because your mother has always been jealous of our close relationship and will try to undermine it. Tyler put his arm around Rachel as she showed us email after email, text after text, all subtly or overtly painting me as unstable, jealous, or manipulative. I can't believe I didn't see it, Rachel said, closing the laptop. It's so obvious now. Manipulation is insidious, David commented, especially from someone you trust completely. In the weeks that followed, Rachel began the difficult process of establishing boundaries with Frank. She hired a lawyer to review her business contracts and discovered that Frank's 51% ownership gave him veto power over all major decisions. I'm buying him out, she told me during one of our weekly lunches, now a standing date. Tyler and I are using part of our savings. I need to be completely independent from Dad. Rachel also began seeing a therapist to work through the complex emotions surrounding her father's betrayal and our reconciliation. Sometimes our weekly lunches were tear-filled. Other times we found ourselves laughing over shared memories that Frank hadn't been able to taint. Tyler became an unexpected mediator between us, his outsider perspective helping to clarify misunderstandings. He had no history with either side and could see the situation objectively. You both want the same thing, he reminded us during a difficult moment when old hurt surfaced, a healthy relationship built on truth. 6 months after the wedding, our healing journey had made significant progress. Rachel had suggested family therapy sessions, and though hesitant at first, I agreed they might help us navigate the complicated emotions we were both experiencing. Dr. Levine, our therapist, helped create a safe space where Rachel could express her confusion and guilt, and where I could acknowledge my hurt without making Rachel feel worse than she already did. Manipulation within families often succeeds because it targets existing insecurities. Dr. Levine explained during one session. Frank exploited Rachel's fear of abandonment after the divorce and Esther's guilt about the marriage ending. Rachel nodded. I was so afraid of losing Dad too that I was willing to accept his version of events without question, especially when he backed it up with financial support. And I was so determined not to speak ill of Frank that I never defended myself against his accusations. I added. I thought staying silent was the high road, but it just left a vacuum that Frank filled with his own narrative. The therapy sessions were often difficult but always productive. Rachel was working through the realization that the father she had idolized had used her as a weapon against me. I was learning to forgive without forgetting to move forward, while still acknowledging the pain of the past. One major breakthrough came when Rachel discovered financial documents proving how controlling Frank's involvement in her business had been. He had inserted clauses that gave him approval rights over everything from location decisions to staff hiring. Rachel had never read the fine print, trusting that her father had her best interests at heart. I feel so stupid, she confessed during one therapy session. I signed whatever he put in front of me. You weren't stupid, I assured her. You were trusting. There's a difference. Your mother is right, Dr. Levine agreed. Frank took advantage of your trust. That's on him, not you. As Thanksgiving approached, Rachel and Tyler invited me and David to their home for dinner. It would be our first holiday together since the reconciliation. Dad keeps calling, Rachel told me, as we prepared the meal together in her kitchen. He wants to come too, says we should put the past behind us for the holidays. What do you want? I asked, careful not to influence her decision. Rachel sighed. I'm not ready. Maybe someday, but not yet. I'm still too angry about how he manipulated me, how he nearly destroyed my relationship with you. When David proposed to me that Christmas Eve, Rachel was genuinely happy for us. We celebrated with a small dinner at my apartment, which had become a weekly tradition. I'm so glad Tyler stood up at the wedding, Rachel said, raising her glass in a toast. I can't imagine not having you in my life, Mum. And now David too. Tyler continued to be a stabilizing presence in our family healing. His willingness to risk his own relationship with Rachel to expose the truth had earned my eternal gratitude. I just couldn't start our marriage with such a fundamental deception, he explained when I thanked him one evening. And I couldn't watch Rachel throw away her relationship with you based on lies. Martha Tyler's grandmother had become an unexpected ally as well. Her own experience with family manipulation made her uniquely positioned to understand our situation. When my former son-in-law turned my grandchildren against their mother, it took years to undo the damage, she told me over coffee one afternoon. You're fortunate that Tyler intervened when he did. In January, Frank made an attempt at reconciliation. He showed up at my apartment, unannounced, flowers in hand. We should talk, Esther, he said when I opened the door. For Rachel's sake. I think you've done enough in Rachel's name, I replied, not inviting him in. She'll let you know when she's ready to talk. When I told Rachel about the visit, she was furious. He's still trying to control the narrative, she said, making it seem like he's the reasonable one trying to bring peace to the family. Frank attempted a similar visit to Rachel and Tyler's home, but Tyler firmly turned him away. Rachel will contact you when she's ready, he told Frank. Until then, please respect her boundaries. As winter turned to spring, I found myself reflecting on the journey from rejection to redemption. The pain hadn't disappeared completely, but it had transformed into something manageable, a scar rather than an open wound. Rachel had made remarkable progress in recognizing the manipulation tactics Frank had used. She was rebuilding her business on her own terms, having successfully bought out Frank's ownership share. She and Tyler were talking about starting a family, a prospect that filled me with joy. My relationship with David had deepened through the months of supporting each other. His steady presence had been my anchor during the stormy reconciliation with Rachel. When we set our wedding date for June, Rachel immediately offered to help with planning. Nothing elaborate, I told her, just a small ceremony with people we love. "Whatever you want, Mum," she said. "I just want to be there for you like you've always been for me." In late April, Rachel called with news that brought our journey full circle. "Mum, I'm pregnant," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "You're going to be a grandmother in November." As I absorbed this wonderful news, I felt a profound sense of gratitude that the breach between us had been healed in time for this new chapter. The grandchild growing inside Rachel would be born into a family, mending its broken pieces, creating something stronger from what had been shattered. I learned that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we need to set boundaries with, even when they're family. But I also learned that true healing can come from unexpected places. In my case, it took my son-in-law's courage to begin rebuilding what was broken. Today, as I prepare to become both a grandmother and a bride again, I know that family isn't just who's connected to you by blood, it's who stands beside you when the truth is hard to face. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that left you feeling isolated? Or have you witnessed a moment of courage that changed everything, like Tyler's stand at the wedding? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to hear more stories of healing and redemption. Thank you for listening, and remember that it's never too late for truth to prevail and relationships to heal.